When death came knocking, he opened the door and found her instead. High in the Montana wilderness, a man who buried love 15 years ago makes a choice that will cost him everything. One frozen woman, one storm, one bullet that changes two lives forever. This is the story of Colt Mercer and Lena Crow, two people the world tried to break, fighting for something more dangerous than survival, a future worth living. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The silence up here had weight. Not the absence of sound. Colt Mercer had learned years ago that true silence didn't exist. Wind always found a way through the pines. Snow settled with whispers against the cabin walls. Even his own breathing, steady and measured after all this time alone, filled the spaces between heartbeats. But this silence had mass. It pressed against his chest when he woke before dawn. It sat across from him at the table where he ate alone. It followed him through the daily routines that kept a man sane when there was nobody left to be sane for. 15 years he'd lived this way. 15 years since he'd carried Elizabeth up this mountain, her laugh bright against the autumn sky, her hand resting on the small swell of their future. 15 years since winter came early that year and took them both, leaving him with two graves he'd dug with frozen hands and a choice that wasn't really a choice at all. Go back down to the world that kept turning without them, or stay up here where time moved different. He'd stayed. The cabin he'd built for three now held one. The crib he'd carved from pine gathered dust in the corner he didn't look at anymore. The name Samuel was carved into the headboard, a son he'd never meet, buried beside the mother who'd never hold him. Colt pushed the memory down like he always did, stood from the table where coffee had gone cold in his cup. Outside, November wind rattled the windows, and the sky had that particular quality of gray that meant snow. Serious snow. He'd seen 42 winters, could read weather like some men read books. This storm rolling in from the north wasn't the kind that dusted the peaks and moved on. This was the kind that buried things, the kind that killed. He pulled on his coat, the same sheepskin he'd worn the day he buried his family, and stepped into the cold. The air bit at his face, sharp and clean, his breath clouded white. Below, the valley stretched out like a frozen ocean, and beyond that, somewhere past the ridgeline, was the town of Shepherd's Point. 40 miles as the crow flies. 3 days on horseback in good weather. He hadn't been down in 2 years. Supplies came up twice a year. A trader named Mackenzie, who knew better than to stay long or ask questions. Money wasn't an issue. Colt had that. What he didn't have was a reason to be around people who'd look at him with pity or curiosity or that particularly invasive brand of concern that made him want to put his fist through something. Up here, nobody looked at him at all. His horse, a gray mare named Ash, stood in the shelter he'd built against the north side of the cabin. She lifted her head when he approached, breath steaming. "Storm's coming," he said, running a hand down her neck. "Bad one." She knew. Animals always knew. He checked her water, threw down extra hay, reinforced the shelter with additional boards he'd cut last week. The work kept his hands busy and his mind empty, the way he liked it. By the time he finished, the first flakes were falling. Fat and lazy now, but that would change. Inside, he built up the fire, checked his supplies. Enough wood to last a month if he was careful. Smoked meat hanging from the rafters. Beans and flour in the cellar. Coffee that would hold out if he rationed. Whiskey that wouldn't because he'd stopped rationing that about year 3. He was set. The wind picked up as afternoon bled into evening. Snow fell harder, faster, until the world beyond his windows disappeared into white. He ate standing at the stove, venison and beans that tasted like every other meal he'd cooked in this cabin. Read by lamplight until the words blurred. Poured 2 fingers of whiskey and sat in the chair by the fire, watching shadows dance across walls that had heard nothing but his own voice for longer than he cared to count. Somewhere in the night, the storm found its teeth. Wind howled like something alive and furious. Snow drove horizontal against the cabin. The whole structure shook with each gust, groaning in its bones the way old things do when pushed too hard. Colt added wood to the fire and settled in. He'd weathered worse. 3 days the storm raged. 3 days of white fury that erased the world. He kept the fire burning, kept himself fed, kept moving through the routines that marked 1 hour from the next. On the second night, part of Ash's shelter collapsed. He went out in it, roped himself to the cabin because a man could walk 10 feet in that and never find his way back. Got the mare into the cabin's mudroom, got himself back inside with ice crusted in his beard and his fingers too numb to feel the whiskey he poured after. The third day, the wind died. Not gradually. All at once, like someone had closed a door. The silence that rushed in to fill its absence was so complete Colt stood from his chair without meaning to, ears straining for the catch of some sound that would prove the world still existed beyond these walls. By the fourth morning, the sky had cleared to that brittle crystalline blue that only came after the worst storms. The sun rose over a landscape transformed. Snow had drifted against the cabin's east side nearly to the roof. The pines stood frozen in white, branches bent under the weight. The world looked clean, new, like it had been wiped blank. Colt stood on his porch, coffee steaming in his hands, and felt something shift in his chest, an unease he couldn't name. The valley was too quiet. He saddled Ash mid-morning. The mare was skittish, dancing sideways as he led her out into snow that came to her chest in places. The main trail down the mountain was impassable, drifts 12 feet high in the gaps where wind had carved its path. But there was a ridge route, narrow and exposed, that might be clear enough. "Easy," he murmured, swinging up into the saddle. "We're just looking." Looking for what? He couldn't say. The ride took 2 hours. Snow had scoured the ridge clean in places, piled it deep in others. Ash picked her way carefully, and Colt let her choose the path. Below, the valley spread out vast and white and empty. No smoke from chimneys in Shepherd's Point, too far to see. No movement except the slow drift of snow ghosts across the flats where wind still played. Then he saw it. A dark shape against white, wrong angles, too geometric to be natural. He urged Ash forward, heart starting to kick against his ribs, for reasons he didn't examine. As they descended into the valley proper, the shape resolved into something recognizable. A stagecoach. Overturned in a drift 20 yards off what used to be the road. One wheel pointing at the sky. The whole thing half buried, snow sculpted around it like a burial shroud. Colt's hands tightened on the reins. He knew what he'd find, had seen it before, back when he was younger and the world still asked things of him. People caught in storms like this didn't make it. The cold took them quick if they were lucky, slow if they weren't. He should turn around, ride back up to his cabin and let the spring thaw reveal whatever story had ended here. It wasn't his business. Hadn't been his business for 15 years, this business of other people's tragedies. But Ash was already moving forward. Close up, the damage was clear. The coach had rolled, hit something, ice probably, and gone over. The door hung open, snow drifted inside. Colt dismounted, his boots sinking deep. The silence pressed in around him, heavy with the particular weight that came with death. He knew before he looked. The driver was still in his seat, frozen in position. Reins locked in hands gone blue-white with cold. His eyes were open. Snow had settled in the creases of his coat. Inside the coach, 2 more. A man in a city suit slumped against the wall. A woman in traveling clothes, her hands still clutching a bag. Colt stood there, snow to his knees, and felt nothing. He'd learned to feel nothing. Should get the bodies ready for when the thaw came. Should check for identification, for anything that might tell whoever was left grieving who these people were. Should... A sound. Faint. Almost nothing. The kind of sound a man could convince himself he hadn't heard. But he had. Colt moved before thought caught up with instinct. Around the back of the coach, where snow had drifted highest. There, a dark patch. Fabric. The corner of a blanket, just visible. He started digging with his hands. Snow gave way to more fabric. A coat. He dug faster, breath coming hard now, hands burning with cold. The coat had a body in it. A woman, curled on her side, face turned into the drift like she'd tried to burrow into it for warmth. He found her wrist, pulled off his glove with his teeth, pressed 2 fingers to the inside of her wrist, where the pulse should be. Nothing. He almost stopped there. Almost stood up and walked away. Almost. Then he felt it. Faint. Irregular. More gap than beat. But there. Christ. His voice sounded strange in the silence, foreign, like he'd forgotten what words sounded like spoken aloud. He got his arms under her. She was heavier than Elizabeth had been, solid in a way that registered even through his shock. Her face was pale, lips blue-tinged. Young, maybe 25 at most. Ice crystals clung to her eyelashes. She shouldn't be alive. There was no reason for her to be alive. But that stubborn, impossible pulse kept threading through his fingers. Colt looked back at Ash, looked down at the woman in his arms. Every instinct he'd honed over 15 years of solitude screamed at him to put her down, to walk away, to let the mountain have her the way it had taken everything else he'd ever tried to hold on to. His arms tightened. Damn it. Getting her onto Ash took more effort than it should have. She was dead weight, her body locked in the position she'd frozen in. He got her draped across the saddle, got himself up behind her, got one arm locked around her waist to keep her from sliding. The ride back up took 3 hours. 3 hours of fighting Ash through drifts, of adjusting his grip on a woman who didn't move, didn't make a sound, gave no indication she was anything but a corpse. He was too stubborn to leave behind. 3 hours of his mind cataloging all the ways this was a mistake. He didn't have medical supplies, didn't have training, didn't have any business trying to save someone when he'd failed so catastrophically at it before. But he kept riding. The cabin appeared through the trees just as the sun started its descent. He got her inside, laid her on the floor in front of the fire because the bed was too far, and his arms were shaking from the effort of holding her. Her skin was ice. Her lips had gone from blue to gray. When he pressed his ear to her chest, her heartbeat sounded like something trying to stop. No. He didn't recognize his own voice. No, you don't get to do this. You held on this long, you hold on now. He built the fire up until the cabin sweltered, got her out of her wet clothes with hands that shook, not from cold now, but from something he refused to name. She was wearing a dress, heavy fabric, quality make, a gold ring on her right hand, no wedding band. There were bruises on her arms, old ones, faded yellow-green. Colt wrapped her in every blanket he owned, got warm water heating on the stove, tried to remember what the doctor in Shepherd's Point had said that winter he'd brought Elizabeth down, already knowing it was too late but unable to stop trying. Warm them slow, the old man had said. Too fast and you'll kill them sure as the cold would. So he warmed her slow, pressed warm cloths to her hands, her feet, held warm water to her lips and tried to get her to swallow. Most of it ran down her chin. Her breathing stayed shallow. That impossible pulse kept threading through her wrist, weak but persistent. Hours passed. The fire crackled. Outside, stars came out over the snow, bright and cold and indifferent. Around midnight, she stirred. Just a twitch. Her fingers curling slightly, but it was movement, and movement meant alive, and alive meant... Colt didn't let himself finish the thought. By dawn, her lips had regained some color. By mid-morning, her breathing had deepened. By afternoon, she opened her eyes. Gray. Her eyes were gray, the color of storm clouds over the peaks. They fixed on him without recognition, without fear. Just a long, assessing stare that seemed to catalog everything about him in the space of 3 heartbeats. Then she spoke. You should have left me. Her voice was rough, raw from cold and screaming she didn't remember doing, but steady, clear. Colt sat back in his chair, coffee gone cold in his hands for the second time in as many days. Maybe. No, maybe. She tried to sit up, managed about 6 inches before her body reminded her what hypothermia was. She collapsed back with a sound that was half laugh, half cough. Would have been easier, for both of us. Easier doesn't mean right. Doesn't mean wrong either. They stared at each other. The fire popped in the silence. Finally, Colt stood, poured fresh coffee, brought her a cup and held it to her lips because her hands were still shaking too badly to hold it herself. She drank, grimaced. This is terrible. Wasn't making it for company. Lucky me. Something shifted in her eyes, some calculation being made. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, softer. The voice of someone used to making themselves smaller. I'm sorry. I didn't mean... Thank you. For saving me. I'm grateful. Don't. The word came out harder than he'd intended. She flinched. Don't do that, he said, setting the cup down. Don't make yourself polite because you think that's what I want to hear. Her eyes narrowed. You don't know what I'm doing. I know what people sound like when they're trying to be what someone else wants them to be. You were straight with me a minute ago. Stay that way. For a long moment, she just looked at him. Then something in her face shifted. Not softening, sharpening, coming into focus. All right, straight. Where am I? Montana Territory, about 40 miles north of Shepherd's Point. How long? I found you yesterday morning. It's afternoon now. The others? He shook his head. She closed her eyes. Her throat worked. When she opened them again, they were dry. I didn't know them well. The driver was Frank something. The couple were headed to Portland. Newlyweds. Her laugh was bitter. Guess they didn't make it to happily ever after. What about you? What about me? Where were you headed? She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, away. From what? From whom? She corrected. And that's not your business. You're in my cabin. Alive because I made it my business. I didn't ask you to. No, Colt agreed. You didn't. They fell into silence again. Outside, wind picked up, sending snow skittering across the porch. The sound was familiar, safe. Everything inside these walls was strange and complicated and exactly the opposite of the life he'd built. I'm Lena, she said finally. Lena Crow. Colt Mercer. How long before I can leave, Colt Mercer? He looked at her. Really looked. At the pallor still clinging to her skin. The way her hands shook even wrapped in blankets. The stubborn set of her jaw that said she'd try to walk out of here tomorrow if he said that's when it was safe. Storm dumped 4 feet in the valley. Drifts are twice that in places. The pass won't be clear for weeks, maybe a month. Her face didn't change. Then I'll wait a month. Can you? Can I wait? Yes, I'm good at waiting. That's not what I meant. She met his eyes. I know what you meant. The question hung between them. Can whoever you're running from wait that long? But Colt didn't ask it, and Lena didn't answer it. Instead, she looked around the cabin. Her gaze landed on the crib in the corner. The dust-covered blanket. The name carved in wood. You lost someone. It wasn't a question. Yes. Recently? 15 years ago. And you stayed? Yes. She nodded slowly, like he'd confirmed something she'd already suspected. That why you live up here alone? That's not your business either. Fair enough. She settled back into the blankets. Her eyes were already starting to close. We'll just be 2 people with secrets then, keeping each other company until the snow melts. We're not keeping each other company. You're recovering, that's all. Whatever you need to tell yourself, Colt Mercer. She was asleep before he could respond. Colt sat there, watching her breathe. In, out, steady now, strong. He should feel relieved. She was going to live. In a few weeks she'd be gone, and his life would return to the silence he'd built so carefully. Instead, he felt something else. Something that felt dangerously like dread. Over the next 3 days, a routine established itself. Lena slept more than she was awake those first 72 hours. When she was conscious, she watched him with those storm-gray eyes that missed nothing, took the food he brought without complaint, drank the terrible coffee without comment after that first time, didn't try to make conversation. Colt told himself he was grateful for that, told himself it was easier this way, but found himself aware of her presence in a way that made the cabin feel different, smaller. The silence changed quality when someone else was breathing in it. On the 4th day, she got up. He'd gone out to check on Ash. When he came back in, stamping snow off his boots, Lena was standing at the window. She'd wrapped herself in a blanket and was staring out at the white expanse of the valley. You shouldn't be up. I've been lying down for 4 days. I'm done lying down. She swayed slightly, caught herself on the window frame. Stubborn going to keep you on your feet? So far, it's worked pretty well. Colt moved to the stove, started coffee, felt her watching him. You always this quiet? She asked. You always ask this many questions? I'm trying to figure you out. Don't. Why not? We're stuck together. Might as well know who I'm stuck with. You know enough. I pulled you out of the snow. I'm keeping you alive until you can leave. That's all there is. Bullshit. He turned. She was still at the window, but her eyes were on him now, sharp, assessing. There's always more, she said. Nobody lives like this without a reason. Nobody cuts themselves off from the world unless the world did something worth cutting off. Maybe I just like the quiet. Maybe. Or maybe you're hiding. From what? I don't know yet. She tilted her head. But I'll figure it out. I'm good at figuring people out. It's how I've stayed alive this long. Didn't work out so well 4 days ago. Her expression shuddered. No, it didn't. She turned back to the window. Colt poured coffee, brought her a cup. She took it, and this time her hands were steady enough to hold it herself. Thank you, she said quietly. He nodded. They stood there, not talking, watching snow drift across the valley. It should have been awkward. Instead, it felt like something else. Like a truce, maybe. Or the beginning of one. Can I help? Lena asked eventually. With what? Whatever you do, to survive up here. She gestured around the cabin. Cooking, cleaning, something useful. I'm not good at sitting still. You need to rest. I've rested. I'm not dead. Might as well be useful. Colt considered her. She looked stronger than she had yesterday. Color back in her face. That stubborn set to her jaw that said she'd push whether he agreed or not. Can you chop wood? Can I? She blinked. No, I've never chopped wood in my life. Then you can learn. Now? You want to help. That's how you help. Wood keeps us warm, keeps us alive. Everything else is secondary. She set down her coffee. Show me. So he did. Outside, the cold bit immediately. Lena pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, her breath clouding white. Colt led her to the woodpile, picked up the axe, set a log on the chopping block. Like this. He swung once, clean, splitting the log down the middle. You want to aim for the cracks. Let the grain do the work. He handed her the axe. She took it, tested its weight, frowned. This is heavier than it looks. Most things are. She set up a log, raised the axe, swung. The blade glanced off the side, barely nicking the wood. The force of her own swing spun her halfway around. She stumbled, caught herself. That was terrible. Yes. You're supposed to tell me it was a good first try. Why? Because that's what people do. They encourage. I'm not most people, and lying doesn't help you learn. She stared at him. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. No, I guess it doesn't. She set up another log. Again? Again. She swung 15 times, got through 2 logs. By the end, she was breathing hard, cheeks flushed, and swearing creatively. You're getting better, Colt said. Now you're lying. No, you're still terrible, but you're terrible with slightly better form. She barked out a laugh. I can't decide if you're honest or just an asshole. Can it be both? I guess it can. She set down the axe, flexing her hands. Same time tomorrow? If you want. I want. She headed back inside. Colt stayed out, splitting the wood she'd failed to. But he was aware, in a way he hadn't been in years, of the sound of someone else moving through his space, of footsteps that weren't his own, of the cabin door opening and closing, of life happening in a place he'd dedicated to its absence. That night, Lena cooked, or tried to. Colt came in from tending to Ash to find her at the stove, frowning at a pot of beans that looked more burned than cooked. What are you doing? Failing at cooking, apparently. She stirred the pot. How do you mess up beans? By walking away from them. I didn't walk away, I was right here. And thinking about something else. She shot him a look. Mind reader now? Don't have to be. Your face shows everything you're thinking. Does it? Her voice went flat. Yes? And what was I thinking just now? Colt crossed to the stove, looked in the pot. The beans were salvageable. Barely. That you can't figure me out, he said. And it bothers you because you're used to reading people, used to knowing what they want so you can give it to them or avoid giving it to them depending on what keeps you safest. She went very still. You don't know anything about me. I know you've got bruises that didn't come from the cold. I know you're running from someone specific enough that you said from whom, not from what. I know you're scared, but you're angry about being scared, and that anger's the only thing keeping you upright right now. Her hand tightened on the spoon. You should have left me in the snow. You said that already. I meant it. I know. They stood there, the beans burning worse between them. "Why didn't you?" Lena asked finally. Her voice was quiet, raw. "You live up here alone. You don't want company. You made that clear. So why save me?" Colt was quiet for a long time. "Because I've already buried everyone I cared about," he said eventually, "and I'm tired of digging graves." Something in her expression cracked, just for a second. Then it smoothed back over. "Well," she turned back to the stove. "Lucky me then, saved by a man who's tired." "Lucky," Colt agreed. He didn't sound like he believed it any more than she did. They ate the burned beans without talking. The wind picked up outside, and somewhere in the darkness a branch snapped under the weight of snow. The sound was sharp. Final. Lena flinched. "Just a tree," Colt said. "I know what it was." But she was staring at the door like she expected it to open, like she expected someone to walk through it. "How long?" Colt asked. "How long what? Until whoever you're running from stops looking?" She set down her spoon. "People like Edwin don't stop looking. They own things. They don't let go of what they own." "Edwin. Edwin Halbrook." She said the name like it tasted bad. "My fiancé. Former fiancé. Except he doesn't see it that way." "He hit you." It wasn't a question. She didn't answer it anyway. "He owned my father's debts. A lot of them. When my father died, Edwin offered a solution. Marriage. He'd forgive the debts, and I'd—" She laughed, bitter. "I'd be his. A transaction. Clean, simple. And you said yes." "I said yes because I was 19 and stupid and thought maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Thought maybe I could make it work." Her hands curled into fists. "I was wrong." "So you ran." "So I ran." She met his eyes. 3 weeks ago. Took everything I could carry and bought passage on a stagecoach heading west. Thought if I could just get far enough, he'd give up. But men like Edwin don't give up. They come after you. They find you. He doesn't know where you are. No, he knows the stagecoach route. He knows I was on it. When they find the wreck," she trailed off, "maybe he'll think I'm dead. Maybe that'll be enough. And if it's not, then I'll run again. For how long? As long as it takes." Colt studied her. This woman who'd survived impossible cold, who split wood with hands that had probably never held an axe before yesterday, who'd rather run forever than go back to being owned. "You can stay here," he heard himself say, "until the past clears. After that, you go where you want. But while you're here, you're safe." Her eyes widened. "You don't owe me that." "No, but I'm offering it anyway." "Why?" "Good question." Colt didn't have a good answer. "Because nobody should have to run from being owned," he said finally. Lena was quiet for a long time. Outside, the wind howled, the fire crackled. The cabin held them both in its warm, uncertain space. "Okay," she said eventually. "Okay. Until the past clears." "Until the past clears," Colt agreed. Neither of them mentioned that the past wouldn't clear for weeks, maybe months. Neither of them mentioned that a lot could happen in that time. Neither of them mentioned that Edwin Halbrook might come looking before the snow melted. But they were both thinking it. Colt could see it in the way Lena's eyes kept drifting to the window, could feel it in the tension that had settled over the cabin like a second kind of cold. They'd bought time. The question was whether time would be enough. The days that followed developed a rhythm neither of them acknowledged out loud. Colt woke before dawn like he always had, built up the fire, made coffee strong enough to strip paint. The difference now was that Lena was already awake more often than not, sitting at the table with her blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching the darkness outside give way to gray. She never asked him to talk, never filled the silence with chatter, just sat there, drinking the terrible coffee she'd stopped complaining about, her eyes tracking something he couldn't see. On the 6th day, she followed him outside without asking permission. The cold hit like a fist. Lena's breath caught, but she didn't retreat, just pulled her coat tighter, one of his spares that hung on her like a tent, and trudged through snow that came up to her knees. "Where are we going?" "To check the trap line." "You trap? How do you think I eat all winter?" She went quiet, followed him into the tree line where he'd set snares along the game trails. The first 2 were empty, the third had a rabbit, frozen solid, its eyes already glazed. Lena stared at it. First time seeing something dead? No. Her voice was flat. Just the first time seeing something die for me. Colt reset the snare with practiced efficiency. Everything dies for something. Rabbit dies so we eat. We die so the mountain gets fed eventually. Circle keeps turning. That's a bleak way to look at it. It's an honest way to look at it. He straightened, the rabbit in his hand. Lena's eyes were still on it. You want to learn how to clean it? What? Clean it. Skin it. Prepare it for cooking. You said you wanted to be useful. She looked at him like he'd suggested they jump off a cliff. No, I don't know how to do that. Neither did I before someone taught me. Who taught you? My wife. The words came out before he could stop them. Lena's expression shifted, something softer moving through her eyes. I'm sorry. About your wife and your son. Don't be. They're not your fault. Still, loss is loss. Colt started walking back toward the cabin. After a moment, Lena followed. Will you tell me about her? No. Why not? Because talking about dead people doesn't bring them back. Maybe not, but it keeps them from being forgotten. He stopped walking, turned to face her. Snow fell between them, soft and persistent. I haven't forgotten a single thing about Elizabeth, he said quietly. Not the way she laughed, not the way she sang while she cooked, not the way she looked at me when she told me about the baby. His hands tightened on the rabbit. I don't need to talk about her to remember. I remember every damn day. Lena met his eyes, didn't flinch from whatever she saw there. Okay, she said. Then don't talk about her. But don't expect me to pretend I don't see that crib in the corner. Don't expect me to walk around the shape of your grief like it's not there. I'm not asking you to pretend anything. Good, because I'm not good at pretending anymore. They stood there in the snow, two people with too much history and not enough words for it. Then Colt turned and kept walking. Lena followed. Neither of them spoke the rest of the way back. Inside, Colt showed her how to skin the rabbit. He didn't sugarcoat it, didn't make it gentler than it was, just made a clean cut, worked the skin free from the muscle, removed the organs with efficient precision. Lena watched without looking away. Your turn next time, he said. If there is a next time. There will be. Trapline runs every 3 days. She nodded slowly. Her face had gone a little pale, but her jaw was set. All right, next time. That afternoon, she chopped wood again. Her form had improved. Not much, but enough that she was getting through logs instead of just bouncing the axe off them. Sweat darkened her hair despite the cold. Her breathing came hard, but she didn't stop until she'd split a dozen logs. Better, Colt said from where he was stacking the wood she'd finished. Still terrible, though. Yes, but terrible with progress. She leaned on the axe, grinning despite her obvious exhaustion. I'll take it. Something about that grin hit him sideways. It was real, unguarded, the kind of expression that came from someone who'd earned their satisfaction instead of performing it. He looked away. That's enough for today. I can do more. I didn't ask if you could. I said that's enough. Her smile faded. You know I'm not fragile, right? I survived hypothermia. I can handle chopping wood. It's not about what you can handle. It's about not pushing until you break. I've been broken before. I healed. That's not something to be proud of. Why not? Breaking means I was strong enough to survive being broken. That's worth something. Colt straightened, a piece of split wood in his hands. Is that what he told you? That surviving him made you strong? Lena's expression shuddered. Edwin never told me anything that wasn't a lie. Then stop lying to yourself. Surviving isn't the same as being strong. Sometimes surviving just means you didn't have a choice. And you would know all about that, wouldn't you? Her voice had gone sharp. Living up here alone, hiding from everything. That's real strength. I'm not hiding. Bullshit. You've been hiding for 15 years. The wood in his hands cracked. He forced himself to set it down carefully instead of throwing it. You don't know anything about what I've been doing. I know you're alone by choice. I know you've built a life that doesn't include anyone. I know you saved me and you're already regretting it because having someone here reminds you that you're still alive and you'd rather not be. The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. Get inside, Colt said quietly. Make me. Lena, I'm not one of your traps you can check when it's convenient and ignore the rest of the time. I'm here. You made sure of that when you dug me out of the snow, so stop treating me like I'm something you need to manage. I'm trying to help you. I didn't ask for your help. I didn't ask for any of this. She threw the axe down. It stuck in the chopping block, handle vibrating. I was supposed to die in that snow. That was the plan. Run until I couldn't run anymore, and then let the cold take me. Clean, simple, done. Colt went very still. You wanted to die. I wanted to stop running. Death just seemed like the easiest way to do that. And now? She looked at him. Her eyes were bright, but no tears fell. Lena Crow didn't strike him as someone who cried often. Now I'm here, she said, alive, learning to chop wood and skin rabbits and drink coffee that tastes like burnt dirt, living with a man who wishes I was dead so he could go back to being alone with his ghosts. She laughed, bitter and sharp. So I guess the joke's on both of us. She walked back to the cabin. The door closed behind her with a finality that echoed in the clearing. Colt stood there, breathing hard, trying to push down the anger that had flared hot and fast in his chest. Except it wasn't just anger. It was something else. Something that felt too much like recognition. Because she was right. He had been hiding. Had built a life designed to keep the world at arm's length. Had convinced himself it was about survival, when really it was about not having to feel anything ever again. And now here was this woman who'd tried to die in the snow, who looked at him like she could see straight through every wall he'd built, who refused to be managed or controlled or made small, who reminded him, just by existing in his space, that he was still here, still alive, still capable of feeling things he'd rather not feel. He picked up the axe, split wood until his shoulders burned and his hands ached, and the anger had burned itself down to something manageable. Then he went inside. Lena was at the stove, cooking. The smell of rabbit stew filled the cabin. She didn't look up when he entered. I'm sorry, Colt said. Her hand stilled on the spoon. For what? For treating you like a problem to solve. I'm a problem. I'm a stranger in your house who you didn't invite and can't get rid of until spring. You're a person who almost died, who's trying to figure out how to live. That's not a problem. That's just hard. She turned to face him. Her expression was guarded, but something in her eyes had softened. You're hard too, she said. Not a problem. Just hard. I know. So maybe we're both just hard people trying to survive the winter. Maybe. They looked at each other across the small space of the cabin. Outside, snow began to fall again. Soft. Steady. The kind that would last all night. The stew's almost ready, Lena said finally. It smells good. Don't get your hopes up. I've never cooked rabbit before. Can't be worse than the beans. She almost smiled. Low bar. You said it. This time she did smile. Small, but real. They ate in a silence that felt different than before. Less tense. More like two people who'd said hard things and were still sitting at the same table after. That night, Lena asked about the books on his shelf. You read all of these? Most of them, some twice. She pulled one down. Poetry, Whitman. The spine was cracked from multiple readings. Can I? Go ahead. She settled into the chair by the fire. Colt washed the dishes, aware of her presence in a way that was becoming familiar. The soft sound of pages turning, her occasional quiet intake of breath when a line landed. Listen to this, she said suddenly. I am large. I contain multitudes. Colt dried his hands. What about it? It's true, isn't it? People aren't just one thing. They're contradictions. Complications. She looked up at him. You're a man who lives alone but saved a stranger. I'm a woman who wanted to die but keeps chopping wood. We contain multitudes. Whitman was talking about something else. Maybe, but it still fits. She went back to reading. Colt sat in the other chair, his own book open but unread in his lap. He found himself watching her instead. The way firelight caught in her dark hair, the small furrow between her eyebrows when she concentrated, the way she mouthed words silently before reading them aloud. You're staring, she said without looking up. Sorry. Don't be. I'm just wondering why. Trying to figure you out. How's that going? Poorly. She laughed. Good. I'd hate to be predictable. No danger of that. They read until the fire burned low. Lena fell asleep in the chair, the book open in her lap. Colt watched her for a moment. Her face relaxed in sleep. The tension she carried while awake finally smoothed away. He should wake her, send her to the bed while he took the floor like he'd been doing. Instead, he built up the fire, draped a blanket over her shoulders, settled into his own chair. When he woke near dawn, she was watching him. "You talk in your sleep," she said quietly. "What did I say?" "Elizabeth's name and Samuel's." She paused. "You were apologizing to them." Colt sat up. His neck ached from the angle he'd slept at. "I shouldn't have—" Don't apologize for grieving." She pulled the blanket tighter. "I heard my mother's name in my own sleep for years after she died. Sometimes I still do. The dead don't leave us just because we want them to." "No, they don't?" "Is that why you stay up here, so you can keep them close?" Colt was quiet for a long time. Outside, the first gray light of dawn was creeping across the snow. "I stay up here because down there, people forget. They move on. They expect you to move on." He looked at his hands. "Up here, I don't have to pretend I'm over it. I can just be broken without anyone telling me I should be healed by now." "That's not living. That's just waiting to die." "Maybe. Definitely." She stood, the blanket falling away. "You want to know the difference between you and me, Colt? We both wanted to stop running, but I chose the snow. You chose this cabin. At least I was honest about wanting to die." The words hit like a slap. "That's not fair, isn't it?" She moved to the window. "You said you're tired of digging graves, but you're still burying yourself every day. Just slower, just alone. And what are you doing? Chopping wood and pretending that makes you less dead inside?" She turned. Her eyes were bright with something fierce. "I'm trying. That's more than you've done in 15 years. You don't know what I've done. I know what you haven't done. You haven't left this mountain, haven't let anyone in, haven't allowed yourself to want anything except silence." She crossed back to him. "You saved me, Colt. And I'm grateful. But don't act like that makes you alive. It just makes you capable of keeping other people alive while you rot." He stood. They were close now. Close enough that he could see the pulse jumping in her throat. Close enough to see that her hands were shaking. "You think you know me," he said quietly. "You don't. Then tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you're not just existing up here. Tell me there's something you want besides being left alone to die slowly. What I want doesn't matter." "That's a coward's answer." "Maybe I'm a coward then." "I don't believe that." Her voice dropped. "A coward wouldn't have ridden into that storm, wouldn't have dug me out, wouldn't have fought to keep me alive when I was too far gone to fight for myself. That was different." "How?" "Because you weren't—" He stopped. Couldn't finish the sentence. "Wasn't what? Wasn't Elizabeth? Wasn't your wife?" She shook her head. "I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'm just trying to understand why you'd save a stranger but won't save yourself." "Because strangers are easy. You pull them out of the snow, you fix them, they leave. Clean, simple, no mess." "And yourself?" "I can't fix myself. I tried. For years I tried. And I couldn't." His voice cracked. "So I stopped trying. Came up here. Built this. And it's not much, but it's mine, and it doesn't ask anything of me except that I keep breathing." Lena's expression softened. "What if someone asked more?" "Like what?" "Like actually living, not just surviving." "I don't know how to do that anymore." "Then learn." She reached out, hesitated, then let her hand fall. "You taught me to chop wood, to skin a rabbit, to make coffee that tastes like punishment. Maybe I can teach you something too." "Like what?" "Like how to be alive even when you wish you weren't." They stood there in the growing light. Outside, the snow had stopped. The world was still, silent, waiting. "I don't know if I can," Colt said finally. "Neither do I. But we've got until spring to figure it out." She moved past him to the stove, started coffee, the familiar motions of morning routine pulling them back from whatever edge they'd been standing on. Colt sat at the table, watched her move through his space with increasing confidence, thought about what she'd said. She was right. About most of it. Maybe all of it. He had been rotting up here, had built a life that was really just a slow death, had saved her because saving her was easier than saving himself. But the thing she didn't understand, the thing he couldn't explain, was that he didn't know how to want things anymore. Didn't know how to reach for anything except the next day, the next routine, the next small piece of survival. Except he'd been aware of her in ways he hadn't been aware of anything in years. Had noticed things. Her laugh. Her stubbornness. The way she didn't make herself small even though the world had clearly tried to teach her to. Had felt something shift in his chest when she smiled that real, unguarded smile after chopping wood. Had wanted, just for a second, to see her smile like that again. And wanting anything, even something that's small, felt dangerous after so long without it. "Coffee's ready," Lena said, setting a cup in front of him. "Thank you." She sat across from him. They drank in silence. Outside, a bird called. The first sound of life they'd heard in days beyond their own breathing. "Spring's coming," Lena said quietly. "Eventually. Yes. And when it does, I'll leave." "I know. But until then?" Colt looked at her. This woman who'd crawled out of death, who chopped wood with terrible form and read poetry by firelight, who saw through him in ways that should have made him angry, but instead just made him tired of lying to himself. "Until then," he said, "we figure it out." She nodded. Together? He thought about it, about what that meant, about all the ways it could go wrong, about the small, stubborn fact that he didn't want to do this alone anymore. "Together," he agreed. Something in her expression eased, not relief exactly, more like recognition, like they'd both just admitted to something true and terrifying and necessary. They finished their coffee. Colt went out to check on Ash. Lena cleaned up from breakfast. The day unfolded like the ones before it, but different now. Changed by what had been said in the gray light of dawn. That afternoon, she chopped wood without him asking. He watched from the porch, not correcting her form, just letting her work through it herself. When she finished, she looked up at him. "Better?" "Getting there." She grinned, tired and sweat-damp and real. And Colt felt something in his chest, something that had been frozen for 15 years, begin, just barely, to thaw. It hurt, but it was the kind of hurt that meant healing, the kind that meant alive. The days after that conversation shifted in small ways that added up to something neither of them named. Lena stopped sleeping in the chair and took the bed without arguing when Colt offered it properly. He took the floor without complaint. They traded off cooking duties, though Colt's meals were still better because he'd had years of practice and Lena was working from scratch. She burned things less frequently. He talked slightly more. They found a rhythm that wasn't comfortable exactly, too much history between them for comfort, but functional, survivable. One morning, Lena woke him before dawn. "Get up." Colt sat up fast, reaching for the rifle that was always within arm's reach. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Just come outside." He followed her out into the bitter cold. The sky was clear. Stars blazed overhead with that particular brilliance that only came in deep winter. "Look," Lena said, pointing north. The aurora. Green and violet ribbons of light dancing across the northern sky. Rippling, shifting, silent and impossibly beautiful. "I've never seen them before," Lena whispered. "I read about them, but I never—" She stopped, just stared up with her mouth open like a child seeing something magical for the first time. Colt watched her face instead of the sky, watched wonder replace the guardedness she usually wore, watched her be, just for a moment, completely unself-conscious. "Thank you," he said quietly. She looked at him, confused. "For what?" "For waking me up. I'd forgotten about them." "How do you forget something like this?" "When you stop looking up." She nodded slowly, turned back to the sky. They stood there in the cold, watching light dance across the darkness, until Lena started shivering hard enough that her teeth chattered. "Inside," Colt said. 5 more minutes. You'll freeze." "I survived worse." "That's not a reason to push it." She sighed, but followed him back to the cabin. He built up the fire while she made coffee. They sat by the stove, warming their hands, neither speaking. "My mother used to tell me stories about the northern lights," Lena said eventually. "She said they were the spirits of the dead, dancing." "What do you think they are?" "Light. Just light. But it's nice to think of them as more." She looked at him. "Do you think they're out there? Elizabeth and Samuel somewhere? I don't know. But you hope. Sometimes. Other times I think the dead are just dead, and we tell ourselves stories to make it hurt less. Does it hurt less? No, she smiled sadly. At least you're honest. They sat in silence. Outside, dawn started its slow arrival. The aurora faded as the sky lightened. Edwin used to tell me I was too dark, Lena said suddenly. Too serious. He wanted me to smile more, be lighter, more pleasant. She stared into her coffee. I tried. For a while. But pretending to be light when you're not just makes you tired. You're not dark. How would you know? Because dark doesn't chop wood until their hands bleed, doesn't read poetry, doesn't wake someone up to see beauty. He paused. Dark gives up. You didn't. I tried to. But you're still here. Because you wouldn't let me die. No. Because you fought. In the snow. Against the cold. You fought hard enough that your heart kept beating when it shouldn't have. That's not dark. That's stubborn. There's a difference. Lena looked at him for a long moment. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. A hermit, I guess. Someone mean. Someone who'd save me and then make me feel like I owed him. Do you? Feel like you owe me? No. You've never made me feel like that. She set down her coffee. That's why I don't understand. Understand what? Why you're alone. You're good with people. Patient. Kind when you bother to be. She shook her head. You could have a life, a real one. Instead of this. This is real. You know what I mean. Colt stood. Walked to the window. Outside, full daylight had arrived. The snow glittered, painful to look at. I had that life, he said quietly. Had a wife who loved me. A child on the way. A future I could see mapped out clear as day, and then winter came and took it all, and I... His voice caught. I couldn't go back. Couldn't rebuild. Couldn't let myself want any of it again, because wanting it meant losing it, and I can't... He stopped. Couldn't finish. Lena came to stand beside him. Didn't touch him. Just stood there, close enough that he could feel her warmth. I get it, she said. Wanting things is dangerous. Because when you want something, you give it power to hurt you. Yes, but not wanting anything is just another kind of death. Maybe that's what I wanted, to be dead without dying. And now? Colt looked at her. At this woman who'd forced her way into his carefully constructed solitude just by refusing to die when she was supposed to. Now I don't know, he admitted. That's progress. Is it? It's something. That's more than nothing. She went back to the stove to start breakfast. Colt stayed at the window, thinking about progress, about wanting things, about the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as dead inside as he'd convinced himself he was. The thought should have comforted him. Instead, it scared him more than anything had in years, because if he wasn't dead, that meant he could be hurt again. And he didn't know if he was strong enough to survive that twice. 3 weeks into their uneasy coexistence, Lena stopped pretending she was fine. It happened over breakfast. Colt had made eggs. Actual eggs. From the chickens he kept in a small coop attached to the cabin that Lena hadn't even known existed until yesterday. She was eating mechanically, staring at nothing, when her fork clattered to the plate. He used to check my plate. Colt looked up. What? Edwin. He'd check my plate after every meal. Count how much I'd eaten. Tell me I was eating too much or not enough or the wrong things. Her hands were shaking. I can't. I can still feel him watching, even here, even now. He's not here. I know that. But my brain doesn't. She pushed the plate away. Some mornings I wake up and forget where I am. Think I'm back in that house. In that room with the lock on the outside of the door. Her voice cracked. And then I remember I'm here and I should feel safe, but I don't because what if he finds me? What if he's already looking? What if... Lena. Colt's voice cut through her spiral. Breathe. I am breathing. No, you're panicking. There's a difference. She sucked in air, let it out shakily, did it again. Colt waited, not touching her, just sitting across the table being steady while she fought her way back from whatever edge she'd been teetering on. Sorry, she said finally. Don't apologize. I'm falling apart. No, you're dealing with something that was designed to break you. There's a difference. She looked at him. You keep saying that. There's a difference. Like you're trying to convince yourself as much as me. Maybe I am. Does it work? Sometimes. She almost smiled. You're a terrible liar. I know. They sat in silence. Outside, wind picked up, sending snow skittering across the porch. The sound was familiar now, almost comforting in its constancy. Tell me about him, Colt said. Edwin? Not the version you think I want to hear, the real version. Lena was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she started talking, and once she started, she couldn't seem to stop. Edwin Halbrook was 43, rich from investments his father had made in railroads and silver mines, respected in Shepherd's Point and everywhere else his money reached. He collected things, art, horses, debts, people, when the opportunity presented itself. Lena's father had been a gambler, a bad one. By the time he died, he'd owed Edwin nearly $10,000. Lena was 19, alone, with no way to pay. Edwin had offered a solution. He made it sound romantic at first, Lena said, her voice flat. Said he'd been watching me, that I was beautiful, that he could give me a life most women would kill for. Big house, nice clothes, security. She laughed bitterly. I was young enough to think maybe it could work, stupid enough to say yes. The engagement had lasted 6 months, long enough for Lena to understand what Edwin really wanted. Not a wife, a possession, something beautiful to display when it suited him, to lock away when it didn't. He never hit me in the face, she said. Always the arms, the ribs, places clothes would cover. He was careful about that. Careful about everything. Her hands curled into fists. And everyone loved him, told me how lucky I was, how generous he was to take on my father's debts, how I should be grateful. Were you? No. I was terrified and angry and so tired of pretending I wasn't both. So she'd run, taken what money she could steal from Edwin's desk, her own money, she told herself, payment for 6 months of her life, and bought passage on the first stagecoach heading west. Portland, maybe. San Francisco. Somewhere far enough that Edwin's reach wouldn't extend. Guess that didn't work out, she said. You're alive. That's something. Is it? Or did I just trade one cage for another? Colt felt the words land like a punch. You think that's what this is? A cage? I don't know what this is. I'm stuck here until spring, dependent on you for everything. Can't leave, can't go back. She met his eyes. How is that different? You can walk out that door anytime you want. And go where? Die in the snow? That's not a choice. That's just a different kind of trap. Then what do you want from me? I want you to stop acting like saving me was simple. Like I should just be grateful and quiet and wait for spring to come so I can be someone else's problem. Her voice rose. I want you to see that I'm angry, that I'm scared, that some days I still wish you'd left me in that snow, because at least then it would be over. It's not over. You're here. You're alive. Alive isn't the same as living. You said that yourself. I was talking about me. Were you? She stood. Because from where I'm sitting, we're both just surviving, both waiting for something we can't name, both too scared to want anything because wanting means risk and risk means pain, and we've both had enough of that to last a lifetime. She walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the knob. I'm going outside. It's below zero. I don't care. Lena, don't. Just give me a minute. She went out. Colt sat at the table, staring at her half-eaten eggs, feeling something sharp and painful lodge in his chest. She was right. About all of it. He had saved her and then expected her to be easy, expected gratitude instead of anger, expected her to heal on his timeline, in his space, by his rules, expected her to be less complicated than she was. He gave her 5 minutes. Then he put on his coat and went out after her. She was standing at the edge of the tree line, arms wrapped around herself, staring at nothing. Snow had already started to gather in her hair. You'll freeze, he said. Good. Lena. What? You gonna drag me back inside, lock me in like Edwin did? She whirled on him. Or maybe you'll just leave me out here. Let the mountain finish what it started. Save yourself the trouble. That's not what I want. Then what do you want? The question hung between them. Colt didn't have an answer, or he had too many and none of them made sense. I want you to not die, he said finally. I want you to be okay. I want... He stopped, couldn't finish. Want what? Her voice had gone quiet, dangerous. I don't know. Yes, you do. You're just too scared to say it. And you're so brave. You're out here freezing instead of dealing with what's inside. At least I'm feeling something. At least I'm not pretending I'm fine when I'm dying inside. You think I'm pretending? I think you've been pretending so long you don't know the difference anymore. Colt took a step closer, then another, until they were close enough that he could see her breath clouding white between them, close enough to see that her eyes were bright with tears she wouldn't let fall. You want to know what I want? His voice was rough. I want my wife back. I want my son. I want the life I had before winter took it all and left me with nothing but this mountain and 15 years of trying to figure out how to keep breathing. I know. But they're gone, and I can't have them back. So I stopped wanting anything because wanting hurt too much, and I can't what? Can't lose anyone else. Can't bury anyone else. Can't stand at another grave and know I failed to keep someone alive. The words tore out of him, raw, true, the thing he'd been holding back since the moment he'd pulled Lena from the snow. She stared at him. Is that what you think? That you failed them? I know I did. How? How did you fail? I should have taken her down sooner. Should have insisted, but she wanted to stay, said she felt safe here, and I believed her because I wanted it to be true. His hands curled into fists, and then the snow came and she went into labor, and there was nothing I could do. Nothing. I watched her bleed, watched my son turn blue before he even took a breath, watched them both die while He couldn't continue, couldn't push past the thing that had lived in his throat for 15 years. Lena's hand found his. Her fingers were ice cold, but her grip was firm. It wasn't your fault. You don't know that. Yes, I do, because if it was anyone's fault, it was the storms, the mountains. Bad luck. Bad timing. Not yours. She squeezed his hand. You couldn't have saved them. Some things can't be saved. Then why try? Because some things can. I'm proof of that. You're different. How? Because you... He stopped, looked at her, really looked, at this woman who'd tried to die and lived anyway, who chopped wood with bleeding hands and read poetry by firelight, who called him on his bullshit and refused to be grateful or quiet or easy, who made him feel things he'd sworn he'd never feel again. Because you're here, he said quietly, and you're alive, and that means something. What does it mean? I don't know yet. They stood there in the cold. Colt became aware that he was still holding her hand, that she hadn't pulled away, that the space between them felt charged with something he couldn't name. We should go inside, he said. Probably. Neither of them moved. Colt? Yeah. I'm sorry for what I said about this being a cage. That wasn't fair. It wasn't unfair either. Still, you've given me more freedom here than I had in 6 months with Edwin. I shouldn't have... Don't. He cut her off. Don't apologize for being angry. Don't apologize for feeling trapped. You have a right to both. So do you. What? A right to be angry, to feel trapped, to admit this is hard instead of pretending you're fine. She paused. We're both a mess. Might as well be honest about it. Something in his chest loosened. A mess. Complete disaster, actually. That's more accurate. She smiled. Small and sad, but real. Come on, before we both freeze to death and prove Darwin right. They walked back to the cabin together. Colt built up the fire while Lena made fresh coffee. They didn't talk about what had been said, didn't try to fix it or explain it away, just existed in the same space with the truth between them. That afternoon, Lena asked to learn how to shoot. Why? Because if Edwin finds me, I want to be able to fight back. Colt studied her. You really think he's looking? I know he is. Edwin doesn't let go of things, ever. Then why wait? Why not teach you sooner? Because I was barely alive sooner. Now I'm alive enough to be scared, and scared enough to want to do something about it. He couldn't argue with that logic. They went outside. Colt set up targets, pieces of wood propped against the snow, showed her how to hold the rifle, how to sight down the barrel, how to breathe through the kick. Don't fight the recoil. Let it happen. Fighting it throws off your aim. Lena nodded, raised the rifle, fired. The shot went wide. She stumbled back from the kick, swearing. That's worse than I thought it would be. Most things are. Again. She fired 5 more times. Hit the target once, glancing blow that barely counted. I'm terrible at this too. You're learning. There's a difference. You and your differences. They matter. She fired again. This time the shot hit center mass. Her eyes widened. I hit it. You did. I actually hit it. Don't get cocky. One shot doesn't make you a marksman. But she was grinning, wide and unguarded. The same expression she'd had after chopping wood. Victory earned through effort. Colt felt that dangerous warmth in his chest again, shoved it down. Keep practicing. They spent an hour out there. By the end, Lena was hitting more than she missed. Her hands were steady, her breathing controlled. She looked competent, capable, dangerous, in the way that someone who knows their own strength is dangerous. Good, Colt said when they finally went back inside. Just good? You want me to lie and say you're a natural? No, but maybe very good wouldn't kill you. Very good, he amended. She smiled. There, was that so hard? Excruciating. She laughed. The sound filled the cabin, bright and unexpected. Colt realized he'd never heard her laugh like that before. Not carefully, not bitterly, just pure, unfiltered amusement. He wanted to hear it again. The thought scared him more than anything had in weeks. That night they played cards. Lena had found a deck in one of his storage boxes, worn and soft with age. Elizabeth had loved cards, had beaten him at poker more times than he could count. You know how to play? Lena asked. Some. Some means yes in man speak, doesn't it? Usually. She dealt. 5-card draw. They played for nothing. No money, no stakes, just the game itself. Lena was good. Better than good. She had a poker face that gave away nothing and an ability to read him that was frankly unsettling. You're counting cards, he said after she won the 3rd hand in a row. Maybe. Where'd you learn that? My father. Before he got bad with the gambling, he was actually good. Taught me all his tricks. She shuffled the deck with practiced ease. Didn't help him in the end, but I remember. He sounds like he was complicated. He was a drunk who gambled away everything we had and left me with his debts. But he also taught me to read and think for myself and never trust a man who says he has my best interests at heart. She dealt another hand. So yeah, complicated. They played until late. The fire burned low. Outside wind howled, but inside it was warm and the silence between hands was comfortable. Can I ask you something? Lena said as she dealt the final round. Depends on the question. Why haven't you touched me? Colt's hand stilled halfway to picking up his cards. What? We've been living together for weeks. We sleep in the same room. You've seen me in my underclothes when you were checking for frostbite. But you've never... She paused. Most men would have tried something by now, expected something. You haven't. Why? You really have to ask that? I wouldn't ask if I didn't want to know. Colt set down his cards. Because you're not here by choice. Because you're recovering from hypothermia and running from a man who owned you. Because touching you would make me the same as him. No, it wouldn't. How do you figure? Because Edwin never asked. Never gave me a choice. You asking is already different. She met his eyes. I'm not saying I want you to. I'm just trying to understand who you are. I'm someone who doesn't take what isn't offered. That's rare. It shouldn't be. She nodded slowly, picked up her cards. For what it's worth, I appreciate it. The not touching, the not expecting, the treating me like a person instead of what? Instead of a thing to be fixed or owned or managed. She played a card. You're one of the only men who's ever done that. Then you've known the wrong men. Obviously. They finished the hand. Lena won again. She grinned, smug and pleased with herself, and Colt felt something shift in his chest, something that felt like the beginning of wanting something specific instead of just surviving. It terrified him. The next morning, everything changed. Colt woke to Ash's warning whinny. Sharp. Urgent. The kind of sound she only made when something was wrong. He was on his feet before full consciousness caught up, grabbed the rifle, moved to the window. In the valley below, maybe a mile out, he could see them. Riders. 4 of them. Moving slow through the snow but moving with purpose. Coming up the mountain. Coming here. Lena. His voice was sharp. Get up. She was awake instantly. What's wrong? Company. She crossed to the window, saw the riders. Her face went pale. No, he couldn't have. You know them? I know one of them. Her voice shook. The one in front. That's Marcus, Edwin's man. If he's here, Edwin sent him. You're sure? I'm sure. Colt's mind raced. 4 riders. Armed, probably. Looking for something specific. Looking for Lena. How would he know you're here? He wouldn't, but he'd know about the stagecoach. Would have heard it went missing in the storm. He's checking every cabin, every camp, anywhere I might have survived. She grabbed his arm. Colt, if they find me here, they won't. You can't fight 4 men. Watch me. I'm serious. This isn't... You don't understand what Edwin will do. To you. To me. We need to run. Run where? Into the snow? You said it yourself. That's not a choice. It's suicide. Better than the alternative. Colt looked at her, at the fear in her eyes. Fear he recognized because he'd seen it in Elizabeth's eyes when the labor pains started and she knew something was wrong. The fear of knowing you're about to lose everything and being powerless to stop it. No, he said. No running, no more hiding. They want to come up here, they can come, but they're not taking you. Colt, get dressed, warm clothes, then get in the root cellar. What? No, I'm not hiding while you... I'm not asking. His voice was hard. If this goes bad, I need you alive. I need you to be able to get out, get down the mountain, get somewhere safe. You can't do that if you're in the middle of it. I can fight. I know you can, but I need you to survive more than I need you to fight. They stared at each other. Lena's jaw was set, stubborn. But something in his expression must have convinced her because she finally nodded. Okay, but if it goes bad, it won't. If it does, I'm not running. I'm not leaving you. Lena, I'm not. Her voice was steel. I've run enough. I'm done. She dressed quickly. Colt helped her into the root cellar, a small space under the floorboards where he stored vegetables and preserved food. It was cramped and dark and cold, but it was hidden. Stay quiet, no matter what you hear. What are you going to tell them? That I'm alone. That I haven't seen anyone since before the storm. They won't believe you. Then I'll make them believe me. He closed the cellar door, replaced the floorboards, scattered the rug back over it. By the time he was done, you couldn't tell anyone was hiding below. The riders were closer now, maybe half a mile. Colt checked his rifle, made sure his revolver was loaded, took a position near the window where he could see them coming. His heart was hammering, not from fear exactly, from something else. Something that felt like the first real purpose he'd had in 15 years. Someone needed him to stand between them and harm. Needed him to be strong when everything in him wanted to run or hide or pretend this wasn't happening. Elizabeth had needed him and he'd failed. Samuel had needed him and he'd failed. But Lena was alive because he'd made a choice to dig her out of that snow. And he'd be damned if he'd let her die now, because he was too scared to fight. The riders reached the clearing, stopped. One of them, Marcus, Lena had said, dismounted. The others stayed on their horses, hands near their weapons. Marcus walked up to the cabin, knocked. Colt waited a 3 count, then opened the door. Rifle in hand but pointed down, careful, controlled. Help you? Marcus was mid-30s, hard-faced, the kind of man who'd done violence and would do it again without losing sleep. Morning, name's Marcus Trent. We're looking for someone. Woman. Early 20s, dark hair. Might have been on a stagecoach that went missing in the storm a few weeks back. Haven't seen anyone. Mind if we look around? I do, actually. Marcus's expression didn't change. We heard there was a cabin up here. Figured if anyone survived that wreck, they might have made it this far. Nobody made it this far. Storm killed everything that wasn't already dug in. That's so. That's so. Then you won't mind us checking. Colt raised the rifle, not pointing it at Marcus, just making it clear it was ready. I mind. This is my land, my cabin, and you're not welcome. The 3 riders behind Marcus shifted. Hands moved closer to guns. We don't want trouble, Marcus said. His voice was reasonable, calm, the kind of calm that came before violence. Just looking for a woman. Important to her family that we find her. Bring her home safe. Family? Her fiancé, Edwin Halbrook. You might have heard of him. Powerful man, influential, the kind of man you don't want to cross. Don't know him. Well, he knows about you now, or he will when I tell him there's someone up here being uncooperative. Marcus took a step forward. Last chance. Let us look around, we find nothing, we leave. Simple. No. No? You heard me. Marcus studied him. You're protecting someone. I'm protecting my peace and quiet. She's here, isn't she? The woman we're looking for. Marcus's eyes narrowed. You found her, pulled her out of the snow, and now you think you can keep her. I'm not keeping anyone. I told you, I'm alone. You're a liar. The words hung in the cold air. Colt's finger moved to the trigger. Get off my land. Can't do that. Then we have a problem. Marcus smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, we do. He moved fast, hand going for his gun. But Colt was faster. 15 years alone on a mountain taught you to react or die. The rifle came up. Colt fired. The shot took Marcus in the shoulder, spun him around. He went down hard, blood staining the snow. The other 3 riders drew. Colt dove back inside, bullets splintering the doorframe where he'd been standing. From beneath the floor, muffled by wood and earth, he heard Lena scream his name. And the fight began. If you or someone you know is having a difficult time, free support is available. Bullets tore through the cabin walls like the wood was paper. Colt hit the floor, rolled behind the heavy oak table he'd built with his own hands 15 years ago. Splinters rained down. A lantern exploded above him, oil spreading across the floor in a dark stain. He could hear the riders outside shouting to each other, coordinating, professional, practiced. Marcus was screaming, high and pained. The shoulder wound wasn't fatal, but it hurt like hell, and Colt had meant it to. Stay down, he shouted toward the cellar, not sure if Lena could even hear him over the gunfire. Another volley. The window shattered. Glass sprayed across the room. Colt counted shots in his head. 3 shooters. Revolvers, probably 6 rounds each. They'd fired maybe 8 times total. Still had ammunition to spare. He had 12 rounds in the rifle, 6 in his revolver. The math wasn't good. A voice from outside. Not Marcus. One of the others. Give us the woman and we leave. You can keep breathing. That's a fair deal. Colt didn't answer. Moved to a different position, low and fast. Fired through the broken window. Didn't aim for a kill. Aimed for the horses. Dropped one with a clean shot to the chest. The animal went down screaming. The rider barely got clear. You son of a... The man's curse was cut off by another volley of gunfire. Colt reloaded. His hands were steady. Muscle memory from a lifetime ago when he'd been a different person in a different life. Before Elizabeth. Before this mountain. Back when he'd worked as a ranch hand and knew his way around firearms and trouble both. He thought that version of himself was dead. Turned out he'd just been sleeping. The floorboards creaked behind him. Colt spun, rifle up. Lena stood there crawling out of the cellar. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clear, and she was holding his spare revolver. What the hell are you doing? What does it look like? I told you to stay down, and I told you I'm done running. She moved to the window, staying low. 4 men, you said? 3 now. Marcus is down. Can he shoot? Not with that shoulder. Then 3. She checked the revolver's chamber. You taught me to shoot. Let me. Lena, don't. She looked at him. Don't you dare tell me to hide while you fight for me. I'm not some prize to be won or protected. I'm a person who gets a say in her own survival. A bullet punched through the wall between them, close enough that Colt felt the air split. Fine, he shouted, but you do exactly what I say, when I say it, no arguments. No promises. Lena, I'll try. That's the best you're getting. Another voice from outside, closer this time. We can wait you out. Got all day. You got food? Water? How long you think you can hold out? Colt met Lena's eyes, saw his own understanding reflected there. They were right. The cabin only had so much. And even if they had enough supplies, what then? More men would come eventually. Edwin wouldn't stop with 4. They needed to end this. Now. The one on the left, Colt said quietly. By the pine tree. You see him? Lena peered through the shattered window. Brown coat? That's him. On three, you fire. Don't aim to kill. Aim for center mass. Let the kick work for you. What are you going to do? Something stupid. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be. 1, 2. He didn't get to 3. The cabin door exploded inward. One of the riders had flanked around back, must have climbed onto the porch, while they were focused on the others. He came through hard and fast, gun already firing. Lena screamed. Colt threw himself sideways, felt something hot graze his ribs. He hit the floor, rolled, came up firing. 2 shots, both hit. The man went down in a sprawl of limbs and blood, but his momentum had carried him into Lena. She stumbled, fell hard against the wall. The revolver skittered from her hand. Lena! She scrambled for the gun. The second rider was coming through the door now, stepping over his companion's body. He saw Lena, saw her reaching for the weapon, raised his own gun. Time did something strange, stretched, slowed. Colt could see it all happening like a sequence of photographs. Lena's fingers closing on the revolver's grip, the rider's finger tightening on the trigger, the angle of the shot, the absolute certainty that she wouldn't be fast enough. He moved without thinking, threw himself between them, felt the impact before he heard the shot. High on his left shoulder, the force spun him around. He went down hard, breath knocked out of him, pain blooming white-hot across his chest. Lena fired, once, twice, 3 times. The rider stumbled back, holes appearing in his chest like dark flowers. He fell across the threshold, didn't move again. Then there was silence, ringing, terrible silence, punctuated only by Colt's ragged breathing and the sound of Lena sobbing. Colt, no, there's so much blood. He tried to sit up, the world tilted. I'm okay. You're shot. I noticed. This isn't funny. Wasn't trying to be funny. He got his back against the wall, looked down at the wound. Shoulder, like he'd thought, bleeding freely but not spurting, missed the artery. He'd live. Probably. I need to stop the bleeding. We need to finish this first. He nodded toward the window. How many left? Lena looked. Her hands were shaking, but she checked anyway. 1. Just 1. Marcus is trying to crawl to his horse, but he's not going to make it. The other one? Gone. Rode off when it all went wrong. Smart. Or a coward. Sometimes they're the same thing. Colt tried to stand, made it about halfway before his legs decided they were done. Lena caught him. Her arms were stronger than they looked. Don't. You've lost too much blood. Not dead yet. You're working on it. He almost smiled. Help me to the door. Why? Because this ends now, one way or another. She got him there. He leaned against the door frame, rifle in his good hand. Outside, Marcus had made it to his horse, was trying to pull himself into the saddle with one functional arm. The snow around him was dark with blood from his shoulder wound. Marcus! Colt's voice carried across the clearing. The man turned. His face was gray with pain and blood loss. It's over, Colt said. Your men are dead. You're bleeding out. Ride away now, and maybe you make it back to Shepherd's Point. Maybe a doctor can save you, or stay and die here. Your choice. Marcus clung to his saddle. Halbrook will come himself. When I tell him, if you tell him, big if considering you might die on the way down. He'll burn this place to the ground. Burn you with it. He can try. And the woman? Marcus's eyes found Lena in the doorway. You think you can keep her? She's his. Signed contract, legal and binding. She's not property, Lena said. Her voice was steady despite the gun shaking in her hands. I never was. Tell that to the law. The law's 40 miles away, and you're bleeding. Colt shifted his weight. Every movement sent fresh pain through his shoulder. Last chance. Ride away. Tell Halbrook whatever you want, but do it somewhere else. Marcus stared at them for a long moment. Then, with effort that clearly cost him, he hauled himself into the saddle. The horse danced sideways, nervous from the smell of blood. This isn't over. It is for today. Marcus turned the horse, started down the mountain at a pace that was too fast for the snow conditions. Desperate, running. They watched until he disappeared into the tree line. He'll bring more men, Lena said quietly. I know. We can't fight an army. I know that too. Then what do we do? Colt's legs gave out. He slid down the doorframe, leaving a red smear on the wood. Lena dropped beside him. First we stop you from dying, then we figure out the rest. She got him inside, laid him out on the floor because the bed was too far, and he was too heavy, and she was strong but not that strong. Her hands moved with surprising efficiency, cutting away his shirt, pressing cloth against the wound. Her face was set in concentration that didn't quite hide the fear underneath. Talk to me, she said. Stay awake. Wasn't planning on sleeping. Good. Because you don't get to die. Not after... Her voice caught. Not after saving me. Again. Wasn't saving you. Was just moving. Bullshit. You threw yourself in front of a bullet. That's not just moving. That's choosing. He didn't have an answer for that. The pain was getting bigger, spreading, turning the world soft at the edges. Colt, stay with me. I'm here. The bullet went through. That's good. I think. Is that good? Better than staying in. Okay. She was crying now, tears running down her face while she worked. I need to clean it. This is going to hurt. Already hurts. It's going to hurt more. She poured whiskey over the wound. Colt's vision went white. He heard someone screaming, realized distantly it was him. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just bandage it tight. She did. Her hands were sure despite the tears. When she was done, she sat back. Blood covered her hands, her shirt, her face where she'd wiped away tears. You look terrible, Colt said. You look worse. Fair. They sat there on the floor. Around them, the cabin was destroyed. Bullet holes in the walls, shattered glass, 2 dead men in the doorway, blood everywhere. 15 years of careful solitude torn apart in less than 10 minutes. I'm sorry, Lena whispered. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. I brought this here. I ruined... Stop. Colt caught her hand, held it despite the pain the movement cost him. You didn't do this. Edwin did. His men did. Not you. But if you hadn't been here, I'd still be alone. Still be half dead. Still be pretending that surviving was the same as living. He squeezed her hand. You didn't ruin anything. You reminded me what it felt like to give a damn about something. About what? About you. About keeping you safe. About having a reason to fight instead of just existing. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. You can't say things like that. Why not? Because it makes me want things I can't have. Because you're hurt, and I'm the reason, and we're both probably going to die when Edwin comes back, and... Lena. What? Stop talking and kiss me. She froze. Stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. What? You heard me. You're delirious from blood loss. Maybe. But I know what I'm asking. Colt, we can't... This isn't the time. When is the time? When we're dead? When Edwin's men burn this place down around us? He pulled her closer. I've spent 15 years not wanting anything, not letting myself feel anything. And then you showed up and ruined all of that, and now I want what? This, you. Whatever time we have left before the world comes crashing down again. Lena searched his face, looking for something. Truth maybe, or permission, or just courage. Then she leaned in and kissed him. It was soft, tentative. Her lips tasted like salt from tears and copper from where she'd bitten them. Colt's good hand came up to cup her face, drew her closer, deeper. 15 years of nothing breaking open into something. When they pulled apart, Lena was crying harder. This is stupid, she said. Probably. We're both disasters. Definitely. And this changes nothing about what's coming. I know. Then why does it feel like it changes everything? Colt didn't have an answer for that, just pulled her down beside him, let her rest her head on his chest, felt her breathing gradually slow, felt his own heart beating steady despite the blood loss, despite the pain, despite everything. What do we do now? Lena asked quietly. Now we clean up, bury the bodies, prepare. For what? For whatever comes next. And if what comes next is Edwin with 20 men, then we fight. We can't win that fight. Maybe not, but we can make it cost him, make it hurt, make him understand that some people don't get owned. He paused. That you don't get owned. Lena was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder, certain. I killed a man today. You did. I should feel something. Guilt, horror, something. Do you? No, I feel... She struggled for the word. Free. Is that wrong? No, it's human. He was going to kill you. Yes. I didn't even think. Just saw the gun and you falling and I... She pressed her face against his chest. I'd do it again. That's what scares me. I'd kill all of them to keep you alive, and I don't even know when that became true. Colt stroked her hair with his good hand. Welcome to giving a damn about someone. It's terrifying. Is it always like this? No. Usually it's worse, she laughed, broken and wet, but real. You're a terrible comforter. Never claimed otherwise. They lay there as afternoon bled into evening. Eventually, Lena got up, brought him water, more whiskey for the pain, helped him to the bed because the floor was cold and he'd lost enough blood that his body was starting to shake. Then she went outside. Colt tried to stay awake, tried to track what she was doing, but the pain and blood loss dragged him down into something that wasn't quite sleep, but wasn't quite consciousness either. When he surfaced again, it was dark. The cabin was warm, fire burning bright in the hearth. Lena sat in the chair beside the bed, watching him. The bodies? He asked. Dragged into the woods. Animals will take care of them. The blood? Cleaned what I could. Rest will have to wait until you're stronger. How long was I out? Few hours. It's past midnight. Colt tried to sit up. Made it about halfway before his shoulder reminded him why that was a bad idea. Lena was there immediately, helping him prop himself against the headboard. Easy. You tore something trying to be heroic. Wasn't trying, just was. Your humility is overwhelming. I'm serious. I don't know how to be heroic. I just know how to not let people die if I can help it. That's the definition of heroic, you idiot. If you say so. She shook her head, but she was smiling, small and sad, but there. I've been thinking, she said. About? About what you said. About fighting. About making it cost him. And I don't think we can win. Not here, not with just us. She met his eyes. But maybe we don't have to win. Maybe we just have to survive long enough to get somewhere Edwin can't follow. Like where? West, California. Somewhere his money doesn't reach. Somewhere we can disappear. We? The word hung between them, heavy with implication. If you want, Lena said quietly. If you... I'm not assuming... Lena. What? Yes. Yes, what? Yes, we. Yes, together. Yes to all of it. She stared at him. You don't know what you're saying. You're still hurt, still not thinking clearly. I'm thinking clearly enough to know I don't want to go back to being alone. I'm thinking clearly enough to know that whatever we're doing here, whatever this is, it's worth fighting for. He caught her hand. You asked me earlier what I want. This is what I want. You. A chance. A future that isn't just surviving. You hardly know me. I know enough. I know you're stubborn and brave and terrible at chopping wood and good at poker. I know you read poetry and laugh when you mean it and refuse to be small for anyone. I know you killed a man to save me and didn't hesitate. He squeezed her hand. That's enough. The rest we figure out as we go. Lena's eyes were bright with tears again. You're insane. Probably. This is insane. Definitely. We're both going to die. Maybe. But at least we'll die trying something instead of just waiting for it. She laughed, wet and broken and beautiful. When did you become an optimist? About 3 weeks ago, when I pulled a half-frozen woman out of the snow and she proceeded to ruin my entire carefully constructed life. Sorry about that. Don't be. Best thing that's happened to me in 15 years. She leaned down and kissed him again. Softer this time. Sweeter. Full of promise and fear and hope, all tangled together. So we run, she said when they pulled apart. We run. To California. Or wherever we end up. And if Edwin follows, then we deal with it. Together. Together, she repeated, testing the word, tasting it. I like the sound of that. Me too. They spent the rest of the night planning. Colt's shoulder throbbed with every movement, but he ignored it. They had maybe a week before Marcus either died or made it back to Shepherd's Point. Maybe another week after that before Edwin mounted a proper search. 2 weeks total to prepare, to pack, to figure out a route that would get them down the mountain and away before the hammer fell. It wasn't much time, but it was something.
"We'll need supplies," Lena said. "Food, ammunition, money if we have any. I have some saved. Not much, but enough to get us started. I have what I stole from Edwin, about $200. Colt whistled. "That's not stealing, that's highway robbery. He owed me more. 6 months of my life, that's worth at least 200. Fair point. They worked through the logistics, what they could carry, what they had to leave behind, routes that would keep them away from main roads where Edwin's men might be watching. As dawn approached, Lena fell asleep in the chair beside the bed. Colt watched her sleep, watched the steady rise and fall of her breathing, the peace that only came when consciousness finally surrendered. He'd thought 15 years ago that his life was over, that losing Elizabeth and Samuel meant losing everything worth living for. He'd been wrong. Not because what he'd lost didn't matter. It did. It always would. But because loss wasn't the end. It was just the middle. And sometimes, if you survived long enough, there was another chapter waiting. A different kind of love. A different kind of future. Not a replacement, just different. Outside, the first light of dawn touched the peaks. The snow glowed pink and gold, beautiful and cold and indifferent. Colt closed his eyes. Let sleep take him. When he woke again, Lena was gone. For a panicked second, he thought she'd left, run while he slept, decided it was too dangerous to stay. Then he heard movement outside. Went to the window. She was chopping wood. Her form was better. Not perfect, but competent. Each swing split the log clean, efficient, strong. She wasn't the same woman he'd pulled from the snow. That woman had been half dead, broken, running from everything. This woman was choosing, fighting, building something instead of just escaping. And watching her, Colt felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Hope. Dangerous, terrifying, absolutely reckless hope. That maybe they could do this. Maybe they could survive. Maybe, against every odd and all common sense, they could build something worth having out of the wreckage of their respective pasts. Maybe. It was a small word, but it was more than he'd had yesterday, more than he'd had in years. It was enough. They had 6 days before Edwin came. Not the 2 weeks they'd hoped for. Marcus had made it back to Shepherd's Point half dead but alive enough to talk. Word traveled fast when money greased the wheels. A rider brought news up to a trapper's camp 15 miles south. The trapper, recognizing opportunity, rode to warn Colt. His name was Mackenzie, the same man who'd been bringing supplies up the mountain twice a year for the past decade. "Halbrook's gathering men," Mackenzie said, standing in the cabin doorway with snow melting off his coat. His eyes took in the bullet holes, the bloodstains Lena hadn't been able to scrub out, the way Colt's left arm hung stiff at his side. 20 riders, maybe more. Says he's coming to retrieve his property and deal with the man who stole it. Lena's hands tightened on the coffee cup she was holding. "I'm not property. I know that, miss. But the law sees it different when there's a contract involved." Mackenzie looked at Colt. "He's got the territorial marshal in his pocket. Document says she owes him money, says she's legally bound." "The document's a lie," Lena said. "My father's debts died with him." "That may be true, but Halbrook's got lawyers who'll argue otherwise, and judges who'll listen because his money says they should." Mackenzie shifted his weight. "Point is, legal won't help you, not against someone like him." "When?" Colt asked. 3 days, maybe 4 if the weather turns. He's bringing enough men to siege this place if he has to. "Then we leave tonight." Mackenzie shook his head. "There's more. He's got men watching the passes, every route down the mountain. He knows you'll run. He's counting on it." The words settled heavy in the cabin. Colt met Lena's eyes, saw his own understanding reflected there. They were trapped. Stay and fight an army they couldn't beat. Run and get caught in the open with nowhere to hide. "There's a third option," Mackenzie said quietly. "What option?" "I've got a wagon. Supplies headed to Portland. Big shipment. Lots of crates and barrels." He looked between them. 2 people could hide in those crates. Uncomfortable. Cold. But Halbrook's men wouldn't think to search a supply wagon.
especially not mine. I've been making this run for 12 years. They know me.
You'd do that? Lena asked. Risk yourself for us?
Not for free. I'll need payment.
How much?
Everything you've got, both of you. Money, goods, whatever you can spare.
Colt didn't hesitate.
Done.
Just like that?
Money's no good if we're dead. You get us to Portland, you can have it all. Mackenzie studied him, then nodded. We leave tomorrow night. That gives you time to pack what you can carry in a crate. Clothes, essentials, nothing else. You'll be in there 2 days minimum, maybe 3 depending on snow. After he left, Lena and Colt stood in the cabin that had been home for 15 years to one, sanctuary for 3 weeks to the other.
We should start packing, Lena said, but neither of them moved. I know this place is just logs and stone to you, Colt said quietly, but it's where you buried your grief, where you learned to survive alone, where you built a life even if it wasn't the life you wanted. Lena touched his good arm. It's not just logs and stone. It's everything you had left. Had. Past tense. You're really okay leaving it?
Colt looked around, at the chair where Elizabeth used to read, at the table where they'd shared meals, at the crib in the corner gathering dust for 15 years because he couldn't bring himself to move it. I thought this place was keeping them close, he said. Thought if I stayed here, I'd never lose them completely. But you were right. I wasn't living. I was just waiting to die in the same place they did. He turned to face her. They're not here anymore. Haven't been for a long time. I was just too scared to admit it. And now? Now I'm still scared. But I'm more scared of losing you than I am of leaving them behind.
Lena's eyes filled. That's the most honest thing anyone's ever said to me.
Get used to it. I'm done lying. To you, to myself, to anyone. They packed through the afternoon. Colt could only use one arm, so Lena did most of the physical work. She moved through the cabin with careful efficiency, choosing what mattered and leaving what didn't. She packed his books, the Whitman especially. Packed the carved wooden box Elizabeth had given him on their wedding day, even though he didn't ask her to. Packed weapons and ammunition and the money he'd hidden under the floorboards. Colt watched her work, watched her make space for his history even as they prepared to leave it behind. Why the box? He asked. Lena looked up from where she was wrapping it in cloth. Because it matters to you. Because running away doesn't mean forgetting. It just means carrying what matters and leaving what doesn't. And you think the box matters? I think Elizabeth matters. I think Samuel matters. I think the man you were when you loved them matters. She set the box carefully in the crate. I'm not trying to replace them. I'm just trying to make room for all of it. Who you were. Who you are, who you're becoming. Colt had to look away, had to push down the thing rising in his chest that felt too much like gratitude and grief and love all tangled together. That night, they didn't sleep. Couldn't. Too much to do, too much to feel, too much awareness that this was the last night in a place that had defined both their lives in different ways. Lena made coffee. They sat at the table drinking it, not talking, just existing in the same space while time ran out.
Tell me about her, Lena said finally. About Elizabeth. I thought you didn't want to hear about dead people. I changed my mind. If we're leaving her behind, I want to know who we're leaving. So Colt told her about how they'd met at a barn dance in Shepherd's Point, how Elizabeth had been visiting from Denver, and he'd been fresh off a cattle drive, and they'd both been too young to know better. How she'd laughed at his terrible dancing and he'd fallen in love with the sound. How they'd married 3 months later against her father's wishes and built this cabin with their own hands because they couldn't afford to pay someone else to do it. How she'd been fearless and funny and bad at cooking but good at everything else. How she'd sung while she worked and read poetry aloud and made this mountain feel less lonely just by being in it. How she'd told him about the baby on a morning that had been so clear and bright it hurt to look at. How they'd carved Samuel's name together, arguing over whether to add a middle name, settling on just the one because it was perfect as it was. How winter had come early that year. How the labor had started 3 weeks too soon. How he'd known, even before the blood started, that something was wrong. How he'd tried everything, begged her to hold on, promised her anything, everything. How she'd looked at him near the end and said, "Take care of yourself, Colt. Don't stop living just because I did."
how he'd failed that promise for 15 years. When he finished, Lena was crying silently, tears streaming down her face without sound. She sounds like she was extraordinary. She was. I wish I could have met her. She would have liked you, the real you, not the version you pretended to be for Edwin. How do you know? Because she didn't like people who made themselves small either. She'd have seen through it in about 5 seconds. Lena smiled through her tears. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for asking. They sat in silence. Outside, wind picked up. Snow began to fall. Soft at first, then harder. The kind of snow that buried things. We should get some rest, Colt said. Tomorrow's going to be hell. But neither of them moved toward the bed. I'm scared, Lena admitted. Of leaving, of getting caught. Of what happens if we make it to Portland and Edwin finds us anyway. I'm scared too. You don't look scared. I've had more practice hiding it. Will you teach me? No. I like that you don't hide it. Makes it easier to be honest about my own fear when you're not pretending you don't have any. She reached across the table, took his hand. They sat like that, fingers intertwined, while the fire burned low and the snow piled up outside. Eventually they did sleep, curled together in the bed that had held Colt's grief for so long and now held something else. Something that felt like the beginning of hope instead of the end of it. Mackenzie arrived the next evening with a wagon and a grim expression. They're moving faster than I thought. Day and a half out, maybe less. Then we leave now, Colt said. Can you ride with that shoulder? Don't have a choice. They loaded the crates into the wagon. Colt had packed light, just what would fit in a space barely big enough for a grown man to lie down in. Lena's crate was equally sparse. They were leaving behind everything that didn't fit in 3 cubic feet. Colt took one last look at the cabin, at the home he'd built, the grave markers on the hill behind it, the life he'd carved out of grief and solitude and stubborn refusal to die. Ready? Lena asked quietly. No, but that's never stopped me before. She squeezed his hand, then climbed into her crate. Mackenzie nailed the lid shut, leaving small gaps for air, did the same for Colt. Darkness closed in. The space was tight, cramped, cold. Colt could hear his own breathing loud in the confined space, could feel his shoulder throbbing with every heartbeat, could taste fear bitter on his tongue. The wagon started moving. Time became strange in the darkness. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt like days. The wagon jolted over rough terrain, every bump sending fresh pain through Colt's shoulder. He could hear Mackenzie talking to the horses, could hear other voices sometimes when they passed travelers on the road, could hear his own heartbeat counting down the distance between freedom and capture. They'd been traveling maybe 6 hours when the wagon stopped. Voices. Multiple. Close. Evening, Mackenzie. Colt's blood went cold. He knew that voice. Marcus. Somehow the man had survived his wound and was already back on his feet. Marcus, didn't expect to see you up and about so soon. Halbrook pays for the best doctors. Shoulders still stiff, but I'll live. A pause. You heading to Portland? Same as always. Supply run. Mind if we take a look? Halbrook's looking for someone. Woman. Might be trying to sneak out hidden in a wagon. Colt's hand found this knife in his boot. If they opened the crate, he'd go down fighting. Take as many with him as he could. Give Lena a chance to run, even if it was a slim one. Look all you want, Mackenzie said. His voice was steady, bored. But you'll owe me for the time. These supplies are expected in Portland by week's end. Footsteps. Close. Right next to the wagon. Colt could hear someone climbing up, could hear crates being shifted, could hear his own breathing and prayed it wasn't loud enough to carry. What's in this one? Marcus's voice, right above Colt's crate. Grain, flour, beans. Same as always. Heavy. Grain's heavy. A long pause. Colt's hand tightened on the knife. His heart hammered so loud he was sure they could hear it. Then Marcus jumped down. All right, you're clear. Sorry for the delay. No problem. Just doing your job. The wagon started moving again. Colt forced himself to breathe, to unclench his hand from the knife, to let the adrenaline drain away slowly instead of all at once. They'd made it through the first checkpoint. The wagon traveled through the night, stopped twice more for inspections. Each time, Mackenzie's calm authority and the mundane nature of his cargo got them through. Each time, Colt prepared to fight and didn't have to. By the second day, the cold had settled into his bones. His shoulder was agony. The darkness and confinement were doing things to his mind, making him see Elizabeth's face in the black, hear Samuel crying even though his son had never drawn breath. He focused on Lena, on the fact that she was in a crate 10 feet away going through the same hell, on the promise they'd made to each other, on the future they were trying to reach. On the third day, the wagon stopped and didn't start again. Footsteps. The sound of nails being pried loose. Light flooded in, blinding after so much darkness. Mackenzie's face appeared above him. "We're clear. Portland docks. Halbrook's men turned back yesterday. Far as they know, you disappeared into the mountains." Colt tried to climb out. His body had other ideas, legs cramped, shoulder screaming. Mackenzie had to help him. Lena emerged from her crate looking only slightly better, pale, shaking, but alive. They stood on the docks surrounded by the noise and chaos of Portland. Ships, merchants, people everywhere. More people than Colt had seen in 15 years. "Where will you go?" Mackenzie asked. "Don't know yet," Colt admitted. "Somewhere he can't find us." "Might I suggest San Francisco? Big city, easy to disappear in? And I know some people there who don't ask questions." He handed Colt a piece of paper with an address, a name, a way forward. "The money?" Colt asked. "Keep it. You'll need it more than I do. We had a deal, and I'm changing it. Consider it payment for making an old man feel like he did something that mattered." Mackenzie tipped his hat. "Good luck to you both." He was gone before they could argue. Lena and Colt stood on the docks, disoriented and exhausted and free. "San Francisco?" Lena asked. "You ever been?" "Never been anywhere except Shepherd's Point and the inside of Edwin's house." "Then San Francisco sounds good." They found a boarding house near the docks, paid for a room, climbed the stairs holding each other up because neither of them was steady on their feet. Inside, Lena helped Colt out of his coat, checked his shoulder wound. It had bled through the bandage, but not badly. She cleaned it, rewrapped it, her hands gentle and sure. "We made it," she said quietly. "We did." "I didn't think we would." "Neither did I." She sat beside him on the narrow bed. They were both filthy, exhausted, hurt, but alive. "What happens now?" Lena asked. "Now we figure out how to live instead of just survive." "You know how to do that?" "No, but we'll learn together." She leaned against him, careful of his shoulder. He wrapped his good arm around her. Outside, the city moved around them, loud and alive and full of possibility. A place big enough to get lost in, big enough to start over in, big enough to build something new. They stayed in Portland 3 days, long enough for Colt's shoulder to stop bleeding, long enough to buy supplies and tickets on a steamer heading south, long enough to send a letter to Mackenzie with half their money enclosed because a deal was a deal even if he'd tried to refuse it. The journey to San Francisco took 5 days. They stood on deck watching the coastline slide past. Neither of them talked much. There wasn't much to say that hadn't already been said in a cabin on a mountain or whispered in darkness while hiding from men with guns. San Francisco rose out of the fog like something from a dream, bigger than Colt had imagined, busier, more chaotic. Perfect. They found the address Mackenzie had given them. A boarding house run by a Chinese woman named Lin, who asked no questions and accepted cash without requiring names or references. The room was small, clean, anonymous, everything they needed. "This is it," Lena said, standing at the window looking out at a city neither of them knew. "This is where we start." "Scared?" "Terrified. You?" "Same." She turned to face him. "But we're doing it anyway." "We are." "Why?" "Because scared is just how you feel when you're doing something that matters. And this matters." "This?" "You, me, us, whatever we're building, it matters." Lena crossed to him, took his face in her hands, kissed him soft and slow and full of promise. "I love you," she said when they pulled apart. "I don't know when it happened, somewhere between the snow and the cabin and learning to chop wood. But it happened, and I'm tired of not saying it." Colt's throat tightened. "I love you too, and I'm terrified of it, of losing you, of failing you the way I failed them." "You didn't fail them, and you won't fail me, because I'm not them. I'm here. I'm alive, and I'm choosing you every day. That's the difference."
What if Edwin finds us? Then we deal with it, together. What if it's not enough? Then it's still more than we had before. More than hiding, more than running, more than waiting to die. She kissed him again. We get to choose now, both of us. That's everything. And she was right. They'd both spent so long being owned by their pasts, by grief, by fear, by people who saw them as things to be controlled or possessed or managed. But here, in this anonymous room in this enormous city, they were finally free. Free to choose, free to build, free to fail and try again. Free to love without it being a transaction or a trap. Just free. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Colt found work at the docks. Hard labor that his shoulder protested, but his pride wouldn't let him refuse. Lena found work at a seamstress shop. Turned out she had a talent for it that had been buried under years of being told what she couldn't do. They lived small, saved money, built a life one day at a time. Some days were hard. Colt woke screaming from nightmares about Elizabeth, about the baby, about gunfire and blood, and Lena lying in snow that wouldn't melt. Lena had her own nightmares. About Edwin finding her, about being locked in rooms with no way out, about losing the freedom she'd fought so hard to claim. But they worked through it, together, learning each other's triggers and fears and the specific ways their respective damages manifested. Learning that love wasn't about being perfect. It was about being honest, about showing up broken and letting someone else help carry the weight. 6 months after arriving in San Francisco, they were married. Nothing fancy, just a quick ceremony at the courthouse with Lynn and her husband as witnesses. Lena wore a dress she'd made herself. Colt wore the only suit he owned, borrowed from another dock worker. Afterward, they walked along the waterfront eating fish and chips from a street vendor, watching ships come and go. "Think he's still looking?" Lena asked. "Probably. Men like Edwin don't give up." "Scared?" "Every day. But less than I used to be." "Why less?" "Because I've learned something these past months." "What?" "That the thing I was most scared of, losing someone I love, already happened. And it nearly killed me. But it didn't. I survived." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "And if it happened again, with you, it would destroy me. But I'd survive that too, because that's what we do. We survive. We keep going. We build new things from the wreckage of old things." "That's dark. That's honest." "I prefer the honesty." "I know. It's one of the things I love about you." They walked back to their boarding house as the sun set over the bay. The room was cramped and the walls were thin and their possessions still fit in 2 crates because they hadn't accumulated much. But it was theirs. Built by choice, maintained by effort, made meaningful by the simple fact that they'd chosen it together. That night, lying in bed with Lena's head on his chest, Colt thought about the cabin on the mountain, about the graves on the hill, about the life he'd left behind. He didn't regret leaving, but he didn't regret having it either. Both were true. Both mattered. The man who'd loved Elizabeth was still part of him. The grief was still there. The loss. The what-ifs and if-onlys that would never have answers. But there was space now for other things too, for Lena, for this life they were building, for the possibility that you could carry your dead with you and still move forward, that you could honor what was lost without being buried by it. "You still awake?" Lena whispered. "Yeah. What are you thinking about?" "About how we got here, about all the things that had to go wrong for us to end up right." "You think we're right?" "I think we're trying. That's close enough." She lifted her head to look at him. "I never thanked you for saving me, for seeing me, for giving me a chance to be something other than what Edwin tried to make me." "You saved yourself. I just provided the opportunity." "We saved each other then." "Yeah, I think we did." She settled back against him. Outside, the city hummed with life, endless, chaotic, full of people with their own stories, their own griefs, their own hard-won freedoms. They were just 2 more. Nothing special, nothing extraordinary. Just 2 broken people who'd found each other in the snow and decided that surviving wasn't enough, that they wanted more, that they'd fight for more. And sometimes, in this messy, imperfect, terrifying work of living, that was exactly what love looked like. Not perfect, not easy, not without cost, but chosen, built, earned through blood and fear and the stubborn refusal to give up even when giving up would be easier. That was worth something. That was worth everything. Years later, when people asked how they met, Lena would smile and say, "He found me in the snow." And Colt would add, "And she reminded me what it meant to be alive." It was the truth. Not all of it, but enough. The rest, the violence, the fear, the running, the hiding, that was theirs to carry. Their history, their burden, and their victory both. They carried it together through all the years that followed, through the life they built in San Francisco, through the children who came later, carrying names that honored the dead without being defined by them. Through all of it, they carried the truth that had saved them both, that sometimes the things that break you are the things that remake you into something stronger, that love isn't about being saved, it's about choosing to save each other, over and over, day after terrible, beautiful day, that survival is just the beginning, living is what you do after, and that sometimes, in the frozen spaces between one life ending and another beginning, you find exactly what you didn't know you needed, not a rescue, not a savior, just another broken soul willing to be broken alongside you. That was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.